In the picturesque neighborhood of Lakeside Estates, where manicured lawns and pristine homes reflect the pride of their owners, Karen stands out not for her charm or generosity, but for her self-entitled demeanor. A longtime resident, she has developed a reputation among her neighbors as someone who feels above the rules that govern their community. With her perfectly coiffed hair and designer sunglasses, she struts through the neighborhood with an air of superiority, often dismissing those around her with a wave of her hand. Karen has a knack for bending the rules to suit her whims. Whether it's parking in front of someone else's driveway or hosting loud parties late into the night, she sees herself as untouchable. Her confidence is bolstered by her connections within the Homeowners Association, HOA, where she often boasts about her supposed influence and wealth. She relishes being the center of attention, especially among her fellow HOA members, who seem entranced by her audacity and charm. One sunny Saturday morning, as Karen strolls through the neighborhood, she catches sight of a glistening boat docked at a nearby home. The boat belongs to Mark, a quiet homeowner who treasures his fishing trips on the lake. To Karen, however, it doesn't matter who owns it. All that registers is its allure and potential for adventure. Feeling an overwhelming sense of entitlement, she concocts a plan to claim the boat as her own. Without a second thought, Karen approaches Mark's dock and climbs aboard. She navigates the boat away from the shore with ease, a grin plastered across her face as she envisions herself as the proud new owner. As she casts off into the sparkling waters of the lake, she feels an exhilarating rush, a feeling of freedom that she believes is rightfully hers. Throughout her fishing trip, Karen brags to her friends from the HOA about her new boat, painting a picture of effortless luxury and leisure. She relishes their admiration and envy, seemingly unaware that her actions are not only illegal, but deeply disrespectful to Mark. As time ticks by and darkness begins to fall, Karen remains blissfully ignorant of the mounting tension back at home. Meanwhile, Mark is left seething with frustration. Instead of confronting Karen directly, an approach that would likely lead to an explosive argument, he decides to take matters into his own hands in a more subtle way. With calculated precision, he begins to drill tiny holes into the hull of his beloved boat, modifications so small that they go unnoticed but will have dire consequences when Karen takes it out again. As this tension simmers beneath the surface, both Karen's bravado and Mark's quiet determination set the stage for an unexpected showdown on that beautiful lake, a confrontation that will shift their lives forever. As the sun rises higher in the sky, casting shimmering reflections on the lake, Karen's excitement reaches a fever pitch. She stands on the dock, eyeing Mark's boat with a sense of entitlement that blinds her to any moral considerations. In her mind, she justifies her actions, thinking that borrowing the boat for a day won't hurt anyone. After all, she tells herself, it's just sitting there, wasting away while she could be out enjoying it. With quick glance around to ensure no one is watching, Karen hops aboard the sleek vessel. The moment she grasps the steering wheel, a thrill of power surges through her. She imagines herself as the captain of this magnificent boat, relishing the thought of how impressed her friends will be when she tells them about her new acquisition. Ignoring the nagging feeling of guilt that tugs at her conscience, she starts the engine and propels away from the dock. The gentle hum of the motor and the breeze against her face fuel her exhilaration as she glides across the water. Karen can hardly contain her joy. Every wave lapping against the hull feels like confirmation of her right to enjoy this beautiful day. She casts her fishing line into the lake, blissfully unaware of the consequences brewing just beneath the surface of her actions. As she settles into her fishing spot, she takes a moment to admire the boat, running her fingers along its polished surface. It feels good to be in control, to take what she believes is rightfully hers, even if only for a fleeting moment. Each cast of her line brings with it a sense of victory. For Karen, this day is not just about fishing, but also about asserting herself in ways that others have denied her. Karen's phone buzzes with messages from fellow HOA members eager to hear about her day. With a self-satisfied smirk, she snaps a picture of herself on the boat and sends it out with a caption that reads, "Living my best life on my new boat." The likes and comments pour in quickly, fueling her already inflated ego. She revels in their admiration, convinced that they see her as someone who has achieved something great. Hours pass as she basks in the sun and enjoys what she believes is a well-deserved escape from reality. The thought that she's taken someone else's property doesn't cross her mind. Instead, it's overshadowed by visions of grandeur and recognition among her peers. As clouds begin to gather in the distance, signaling that it may soon be time to return, Karen remains blissfully ignorant of the brewing storm, both in the sky and back at Mark's home. She thinks only of how this adventure will solidify her status within the HOA community and how they will envy her newfound freedom. Little does she know that while she basks in this stolen glory, Mark has set into motion a plan that will turn this day into an unforgettable lesson about entitlement and consequences, a lesson that awaits just beyond the horizon. As the sun sets on a perfect day at the lake, Karen remains blissfully unaware of the time. Hours have slipped by since she set out, but the exhilaration of her new boat has wrapped her in a bubble of arrogance. The thrill of her escapade overshadows the reality that she is not the rightful owner. Instead of heading back as agreed, she decides to flaunt her good fortune to her friends in the HOA. Karen pulls into a nearby cove, where she has arranged to meet several neighbors for an impromptu gathering. As she docks the boat, laughter and chatter fill the air, and her friends' faces light up when they see her arrival. "Look what I've got," she exclaims, gesturing grandly toward the boat. "I just couldn't resist taking it out for a day on the water." Her friends oh and ah over the boat, praising its sleek design and luxurious features. Karen basks in their admiration, relishing every moment as she spins tales about her spontaneous purchase. She spins a narrative of how easy it was to acquire such a fine vessel, making it seem like a natural extension of her already lavish lifestyle. Each compliment feeds her ego further, solidifying her belief that she deserves this perceived luxury. Meanwhile, Mark is at home, anxiously pacing back and forth as he glances at the clock. He had expected Karen to return the boat hours ago. Each passing minute adds to his frustration and helplessness. He feels powerless against her blatant disregard for his property. The thought of confronting her fills him with dread. He knows that Karen can be confrontational when challenged. Instead of escalating tensions through direct confrontation, he decides to remain calm and collected. Back at the cove, Karen's arrogance escalates as she continues to boast about her new acquisition to anyone who will listen. She shows off fishing gear she borrowed from Mark's stash, claiming it was all part of the deal when she bought the boat. Her friends egg her on, encouraging her to stay out longer and enjoy this new lifestyle they believe she has embraced. As evening approaches and darkness starts to creep in, Karen remains defiant. "Just one more hour," she insists to her friends, who are eager to indulge in more stories and laughter while floating on the water. Mark's phone buzzes with notification alerts as he receives messages from concerned neighbors wondering where Karen could be. The air thickens with tension as Mark realizes that not only has Karen stolen his boat, but also his peace of mind. He knows he must act soon, otherwise this sense of helplessness will only deepen. As Karen continues to enjoy herself without a care in the world, Mark quietly prepares his next move, a calculated plan that will ensure his property is returned while teaching Karen a lesson about respect and accountability. The stage is set for an inevitable confrontation between entitlement and rightful ownership, one that will unfold dramatically as the night deepens over Lakeside Estates. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over Lakeside Estates, Mark sat on his porch, contemplating his next move. The day had been filled with anxiety and frustration over Karen's blatant disregard for his property. He felt the weight of helplessness pressing down on him, but instead of succumbing to anger or confrontation, he resolved to take a more subtle approach. In the quiet of his garage, Mark gathered the tools he would need, a small drill and a few bits capable of creating minute holes undetectable to the naked eye. He knew that confronting Karen directly would likely lead to a heated argument, something he wanted to avoid at all costs. Instead, he carefully plotted how to reclaim his boat without escalating tensions further. As night enveloped the neighborhood, Mark set to work under the cover of darkness. He approached his boat with a sense of determination. Each tiny hole he drilled into the hull was a calculated act of retribution, representing both his frustration and cleverness. The holes were small enough that they wouldn't be noticed during casual inspections. They were just enough to allow water to seep in slowly over time. With each precise movement of his drill, Mark imagined Karen's future panic when she realized what was happening. He envisioned her carefree attitude transforming into sheer terror as she discovered the consequences of her actions. It was a form of justice that felt fitting, an outcome that wouldn't require him to confront her directly while still making sure she understood the repercussions of stealing something that didn't belong to her. After finishing his work, Mark stepped back and examined the boat from all angles. It appeared unchanged, pristine even under the dim light. Satisfied with his handiwork, he locked up and retreated indoors, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He had taken control of a situation that had initially left him feeling powerless. The following morning, as the sun rose and illuminated lakeside estates once again, Karen awoke with grand plans for another day on the water. She had no idea that Mark's quiet resolve would soon lead to her downfall. As she prepared for her next outing with an air of entitlement, Mark watched from afar, secretly hoping that today would prove to be a turning point. With her friends excitedly planning another gathering on the lake, Karen's confidence grew even more audacious. She was oblivious to the brewing storm beneath her feet, the tiny holes in the hull that would lead to an unexpected disaster. Mark knew that it wouldn't be long before Karen took the boat out again. He could almost visualize her laughter and bravado turning into panic as she faced the reality of what she had done. In this battle of wills, he had chosen strategy over confrontation, a clever approach that would showcase not only his resourcefulness, but also deliver a memorable lesson in respect and accountability. As time passed and Karen prepared for her next adventure on the lake, both excitement and tension built in equal measure. The stage was set for an inevitable clash between entitlement and rightful ownership. The following day dawned bright and clear, perfect for another adventure on the water. Karen, still riding high from her previous escapade, gathered her friends for a day of fun on the lake. Her confidence was palpable as she strutted down to the dock, eager to show off her new boat once again. With a smug smile, she climbed aboard, ready to embrace what she viewed as her newfound freedom. As she started the engine and pulled away from the dock, laughter echoed across the water. The sun sparkled on the lake's surface, and Karen felt invincible. She had a cooler full of drinks, fishing gear, and her friends beside her. What could possibly go wrong? They cruised along happily, sharing stories and relishing in their carefree day. However, as they ventured further from shore, a subtle shift began to occur. At first, it was barely noticeable, a slight slosh of water that made its way to the floor of the boat. Karen brushed it off as nothing more than a bit of splash from their wake. But as time passed and they continued on their journey, that small amount of water gradually transformed into something more concerning. Karen's friends chatted animatedly, but she started to feel an unsettling chill creeping in. She glanced down and noticed that the water level was rising faster than it should have been. "Is it just me? Or is there a lot more water in here?" she asked with a hint of uncertainty creeping into her voice. Her friends paused mid-laughter to look around, initially dismissing her concerns. But as Karen reached down to splash some water out with her hands, panic began to set in. The realization hit her like a cold wave. Something was very wrong. "Guys," she said, her voice trembling slightly now, "I think we might be taking on water." The light-hearted atmosphere shifted instantly. Laughter turned into worried murmurs as they all began to look around at the growing puddle pooling at their feet. Karen's heart raced as she fumbled for the boat's manual pump. As she activated it, she could see that it was futile against the amount of water now flooding in. The sound of splashing grew louder, echoing ominously within the confines of the boat. "Is this normal?" one friend asked nervously, but Karen could only shake her head in disbelief. "No, this isn't supposed to happen." She felt trapped. Her mind raced with thoughts of embarrassment and dread at what this would mean, not just for herself, but for everyone on board. Panic surged through Karen as she realized how far they were from shore and how quickly their situation was deteriorating. The boat began to tilt slightly as more and more water entered the hull, sending waves of fear coursing through her veins. She shouted for everyone to hold on tight while trying to steer back toward land, but it felt like everything was slipping out of control. As they neared a point of no return, Karen could no longer deny reality. The boat was sinking fast. They had no choice but to abandon ship. Her bravado vanished entirely, replaced by sheer panic as she instructed everyone to jump overboard and swim for safety. In that moment of chaos and uncertainty on the lake, Karen's world unraveled around her, a fitting twist for someone who had taken what wasn't hers without a second thought. As they paddled toward shore amidst growing waves of anxiety and disbelief, one question loomed larger than all others. How would she explain this disaster when they reached land? As the panic set in, the boat rocked violently, sending waves crashing over the sides and splashing everyone aboard. Karen's heart raced as she struggled to maintain her composure amidst the chaos. "Everyone, we need to get out now," she shouted, her voice barely carrying over the cacophony of splashing water and frantic movement. Her friends, once carefree and laughing, were now gripped by fear and confusion. They exchanged worried glances as they quickly realized the dire situation they were in. Water swirled around their feet, soaking their shoes and rising rapidly toward their ankles. Karen tried to direct them, but her voice trembled with dread. "Grab your things," she yelled, though deep down she knew that saving possessions was futile. "Just hold on to each other. We need to swim." The reality of what she was asking them to do sank in like an anchor. Abandoning a sinking boat wasn't just a terrifying thought. It was an overwhelming reality. In a moment of sheer desperation, Karen turned back to the boat's controls, hoping against hope that there might be something she could do to save it. She fumbled with the equipment, but her hands were slick with sweat and anxiety clouded her mind. The boat shuddered beneath her as more water poured in, each wave more relentless than the last. "Karen, it's not working," one friend shouted, glancing frantically at the rising water. "We have to go." Realizing time was running out, Karen felt a surge of adrenaline. She turned back to face her friends. "Okay, jump in. We have to swim to shore." Without waiting for further instructions or encouragement, her friends leaped into the lake one after another, fear propelling them into action. Karen hesitated for only a moment. She couldn't let them go alone. With a quick glance at the rapidly sinking boat, she made a split-second decision that would change everything. She took a deep breath and jumped into the lake, plunging into the cool water that swallowed her whole. As she resurfaced, she gasped for air and immediately turned back toward the vessel, now tilting dangerously as water poured over its sides like a waterfall. Panic surged through her again as she saw it begin to sink beneath the surface. "Swim towards me," she called out to her friends who were already making their way toward shore. They kicked furiously through the water, desperate to escape what had become a nightmare scenario. Karen's heart raced not only from physical exertion, but from the realization of how far the situation had spiraled out of control. She was no longer just a thief caught in a web of her own making. She was now in survival mode, fighting against the sinking weight of both the boat and her own choices. As they swam together towards safety, laughter and carefree memories transformed into frantic splashes and gasps for breath. The once gleaming boat that had symbolized luxury and entitlement was now little more than a memory sinking into the depths of the lake, a fitting metaphor for Karen's own downfall. The shore loomed closer with every stroke, but with each passing second, Karen felt the weight of her actions pressing down on her, both literally and metaphorically, as she fought against the consequences of her decisions. In that moment of abandonment and desperation, clarity began to emerge. She would have to face not only the embarrassment but also the fallout from this chaotic day once they reached land. As they staggered onto the shore, drenched and gasping for breath, the reality of their harrowing experience began to settle over Karen like a heavy fog. Her heart raced not just from the physical exertion, but from the panic that coursed through her veins. She turned to her friends, still trying to catch their breath, and quickly shifted the blame. "This is all Mark's fault. He sabotaged the boat." Her voice was a mix of anger and desperation, hoping to redirect attention away from her own actions. "He must have done something to it. You all saw how quickly it started sinking." Her friends looked at her in disbelief, still processing the chaos they had just escaped. "Karen, you took his boat without asking," one friend finally replied, shaking her head. "You can't just blame him for this." Karen felt her defenses rise as she tried to maintain her narrative. "No, listen. He must have done something. It's not possible for a boat like that to just sink like that." The frustration in her voice was palpable as she scanned the group for anyone willing to side with her. But deep down, a seed of doubt began to grow. As they caught their breath and calmed down, they couldn't ignore the facts. Karen had taken the boat without permission and had flaunted it around town as if it were hers. She felt cornered by both reality and her own choices. Just then, Mark arrived on the scene, an air of calm authority surrounding him despite the chaos of the moment. He approached with a stoic expression, having heard about the incident from concerned neighbors who had witnessed Karen's frantic swim back to shore. "Karen," he said firmly, "I'm glad you're okay, but this isn't going to end well for you." "What do you mean?" she shot back defensively. "You set me up. You wanted me to sink." He sighed, exasperated. "I didn't set you up. The security footage from my dock shows you taking the boat without permission." Karen's heart sank even further at his words. She had considered that there would be evidence against her. "That's impossible. I was just borrowing it," she exclaimed, but Mark shook his head. "You didn't borrow anything. You stole it," he replied calmly, pulling out his phone and scrolling through various clips. With each swipe, he revealed video after video of Karen casually piloting his boat away from his dock, her laughter echoing in the background as she flaunted her new acquisition to her friends. The color drained from Karen's face as she watched herself on the screen, carefree and oblivious to the consequences of her actions. The mounting evidence against her was undeniable. It became painfully clear that her attempts to shift blame were futile. No amount of denial could erase what the footage showed. She felt exposed and vulnerable as reality crashed down around her, her arrogance now replaced by a sense of impending doom. The HOA members watching from a distance exchanged glances filled with judgment and disappointment. As Mark turned off his phone, he looked back at Karen with a mixture of pity and resolve. "You'll have to face the consequences of your actions," he said quietly before walking away, leaving Karen standing there in shock. In that moment, as she stood soaked and defeated on the shore, Karen realized that there was nowhere left to hide, not from herself or from those who had once admired her bravado. The game was over. Accountability loomed large on the horizon as she faced the fallout from this disastrous day. In the days following the chaotic incident on the lake, the atmosphere in Lakeside Estates shifted dramatically. The HOA, once a close-knit community, found itself grappling with the fallout from Karen's reckless behavior. As news spread about her unauthorized use of Mark's boat and the subsequent sinking, whispers of discontent began to ripple through the neighborhood. During a hastily arranged HOA meeting, members gathered to discuss the implications of Karen's actions. Concerned voices filled the room as they weighed the potential legal repercussions that might follow. What if Mark decides to pursue this further? One member questioned, anxiety etched across his face. "We could all be implicated if we don't distance ourselves from her," another added, emphasizing the need for caution. The tension was palpable as everyone turned their attention to the president of the HO, a well-respected figure known for his level-headedness. He cleared his throat and addressed the group with a sense of urgency. "We need to make it clear that our community does not condone theft or irresponsible behavior. We cannot support actions that put our neighborhood at risk." The decision was swift and decisive. The members agreed that distancing themselves from Karen was necessary to protect their community's reputation. They drafted a letter outlining their stance, clearly stating that Karen's actions were not reflective of HOA values. This move was designed not only to protect themselves legally, but also to maintain harmony within their neighborhood. As the letter circulated among residents, a noticeable shift occurred in how people interacted with Karen. The friendly waves and casual conversations that once accompanied her walks around a neighborhood were replaced by awkward glances and hushed whispers. Neighbors who had previously admired her confidence now regarded her with skepticism and disdain. Karen, blindsided by this sudden shift in dynamics, felt increasingly isolated. She reached out to former friends, desperately trying to explain her side of the story and exonerate herself from blame. "You have to understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she pleaded during a chance encounter with an HOA member at the local grocery store. But her words fell on deaf ears. The community members had made up their minds. They were unwilling to associate with someone whose actions had jeopardized their collective standing. The security footage showcasing her taking Mark's boat without permission had sealed her fate in their eyes. As Karen watched her social circle shrink, she realized that she was now branded as an outsider, a cautionary tale for others about what happens when entitlement goes unchecked. The very community that had once celebrated her brashness now sought to protect itself from any lingering association with her. Meanwhile, Mark received quiet support from those who had witnessed his ordeal firsthand. His neighbors rallied around him, offering assistance and commending his poise through such an unsettling experience. They admired how he had handled the situation without resorting to confrontation while still reclaiming his property. As Karen grappled with her new reality, she began to understand that her arrogance and entitlement had led her down a path of isolation and consequence. The community she once felt so comfortable in had turned its back on her, leaving her alone to face both personal shame and public scrutiny for her choices. As the dust settled from the chaos of the lake incident, Mark found himself reflecting on the surreal turn of events. While Karen was left grappling with her loneliness and regret, he decided to embrace a little humor in the face of adversity. The boat, once a source of frustration and conflict, had now become a symbol of triumph for him, a chance to reclaim not just his property, but also his dignity. With a sly grin, Mark set about rebranding the boat. He gathered his friends for an impromptu gathering at his dock, sharing the story of Karen's ill-fated adventure and how it had unfolded. The laughter that erupted was infectious, and with each retelling, Mark could feel the weight of the previous week's lifting. Inspired by their shared amusement, he came up with an idea that would both honor his victory and poke fun at Karen's audacity. The next day, armed with paint and some stencils, Mark transformed the boat into a cheeky tribute. Karen's Titanic now adorned its side in bold letters. Each stroke of paint felt like a cathartic release, an act of defiance against the entitlement that had plagued their community. As he stepped back to admire his handiwork, he couldn't help but chuckle at how perfectly fitting it was, a sunken ship named after someone who had tried to sail through life without regard for others. But Mark didn't stop there. Capitalizing on the newfound humor surrounding the situation, he decided to install a no trespassing sign on his dock that featured a whimsical illustration of a sinking ship. The sign read, "Welcome to Karen's Titanic. Keep off unless you want to sink." It was a clever nod to what had transpired and served as a light-hearted warning to anyone who might think about crossing boundaries in the future. When neighbors caught sight of the sign, laughter erupted throughout Lakeside Estates once again. It became an instant hit within the community. Everyone appreciated Mark's ability to turn a negative experience into something fun and memorable. Children giggled as they rode their bikes past the dock, and adults smiled knowingly as they shared stories about Karen's downfall. Word spread quickly through social media as residents began posting pictures of Karen's Titanic alongside Mark's amusing sign. It became a symbol not just of individual ownership, but also of community solidarity against entitlement. The humor helped mend any rifts caused by Karen's earlier actions, uniting neighbors as they collectively celebrated Mark's cleverness. Meanwhile, Karen watched from afar as her reputation continued to plummet. The very community she had once captivated was now laughing at her expense. She felt humiliated every time she saw posts about Karen's Titanic circulating online or heard whispers at local gatherings. In that moment, Mark realized that he had not only reclaimed his boat, but also transformed an uncomfortable situation into one of empowerment for himself and his neighbors. By turning a painful experience into humor and camaraderie, he had effectively ended Karen's reign of entitlement while reinforcing the values that made their community strong. As summer faded into autumn, Karen's Titanic remained docked proudly at Mark's place, a testament to cleverness over entitlement, a constant reminder that actions have consequences.